Alors, ce que j'ai aimé, c'est d'abord la présence de tous nos amis de l'Afrique et particulièrement Pakjap. Je crois que c'est un pas qui est appréciable et que nous devons renforcer et fructifier dans l'avenir. Ce que je n'ai pas aimé, c'est qu'on mette l'accent uniquement sur l'adaptation, alors que l'Afrique a besoin de sa souveraineté sur le plan énergétique. Je souhaite qu'on mette un petit peu l'accent sur cet aspect de souveraineté énergétique.
Je pense qu'aujourd'hui, on va répondre à vos besoins, Inch'Allah. Ah.
Bonjour. Ce que j'ai aimé hier, comme je vous ai déjà parlé, Monsieur Saïd, que j'ai bien apprécié votre exercice à la fin pour la restitution, le débat, l'échange qui a été fait. Donc voilà. Et ce que je n'ai pas aimé, non, je ne veux pas le dire le matin, donc on le laisse après. Oui. Mais si vous voulez, si vous pouvez peut-être faire des exercices de plus en plus comme hier, pour être un peu plus interactif. J'ai rien aimé, je rigole, je rigole. Non, je rigole. J'ai aimé le Tajimak, je rigole maintenant. Pour moi, je parle en anglais, puis il y a une traduction. D'accord. For me, I love there is a lot of people from North Africa. I really wish that we have Libyan and Egyptian here. And it was really amazing to see people who are working on adaptation finance, especially I'm from engineering background, and seeing some people talking about finance. This is amazing for me. Thank you.
Tunis, Mauritania.
Salam alaikum. Ce que j'ai aimé hier, c'est les présentations sur la finance et aussi la définition. Qu'est-ce qui était la finance, la différence entre la dette et comment dire, ce qu'a présenté subvention, ce qu'a présenté Martha, parce qu'on faisait pas trop la différence entre les fonds climatiques. Merci.
Oui, bien sûr, bien sûr.
Merci, j'ai aimé Martha. Et
Martha ou l'exposé de Martha?
ça, c'est mon affaire. Ça c'est mon affaire. J'ai dit Martha et alors c'est un intitulé. Alors j'en fais ce que je veux, moi. et j'aimerais encore davantage d'autres choses.
Merci, c'est Anas. Ce qu'il y a, je répète un peu pour les nouveaux arrivés, on est en train de faire une restitution des résultats de hier et on a aimé la faire avec un petit exercice. Lorsque quelqu'un prend la parole, il doit dire hier, j'ai aimé, il continue la phrase, ou hier, je n'ai pas aimé, il continue la phrase. Je pense que l'exercice est facile. Avant qu'on commence, entame, est-ce qu'il y a encore des choses que ils ont été retenues, des choses que vous n'avez pas, parce que ça améliore un peu la discussion aujourd'hui. Ça nous permet de... Ah, c'est vrai.
Merci infiniment. Anna, j'ai aimé vraiment l'expérience de Kenya, comment ils ont essayé de travailler avec l'ensemble des acteurs. Et j'ai pas aimé ce qui se fait c'est-à-dire la manipulation des calculs des budgets qui sont alloués au climat, alors qu'ils restent vraiment très loin de ce qu'ils peuvent donner par rapport à ce qu'ils ont et ce qu'ils utilisent dans d'autres domaines. Merci.
Merci Sixili, parce que Sixili, vous nous avez rappelé une chose très importante. Est-ce qu'il y a encore des informations, quelqu'un retient des informations sur l'exposé, sur l'expérience kenyenne, surtout l'appui à tout ce qui est les gouvernements locaux avec un budget? Est-ce que vous avez bien retenu de la discussion d'hier, c'est-à-dire l'approche kenyenne pour effectivement trouver des solutions des problèmes d'adaptation et surtout de recherche de fonds. Parce que vous savez que le fonds d'adaptation, ça nécessite quand même un fonds public. Et c'est grâce à ce fonds public de l'État qu'on peut drainer d'autres argent pour un peu donner plus de sécurité au secteur privé, plus de sécurité aux autres partenaires internationaux pour qu'ils puissent encore s'investir dans ces questions. Est-ce que c'est ça l'expérience kenyenne? Et c'était vraiment une expérience très riche et on aimerait bien la faire au niveau du Maroc. Pourquoi pas? Nous avons 12 régions ici au Maroc. Pourquoi des fonds dédiés à l'adaptation, peut-être gérés par ministère, je ne sais pas, tel, mais alloués à des régions, mais qui doivent être, si vous voulez, alloués à des actions de changement climatique, finance climatique, surtout au niveau local. Parce qu'on aime, surtout pour l'agriculture, surtout pour les actions, les petites actions. Parce que vous savez que pour accéder au fonds vert climat, ça nécessite toute une gymnastique, ça nécessite tout un travail très dur, même pour les pays. Si on n'arrive pas vraiment à accéder à cet argent, peut-être c'est une façon de faciliter un peu l'accès à l'argent. Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui peut réagir et avant d'entamer sur ce débat, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas encore des choses qui ont été dites hier et avant de commencer la journée aujourd'hui?
Oui, par rapport à ça, je pense que c'est effectivement un aspect qui est extrêmement important parce que l'expérience marocaine a montré qu'au niveau central, on fait beaucoup de choses, des discours, même des décisions, etc. Mais tout ceci n'est pas décliné au niveau local pour réaliser des choses concrètes. CDD, on a organisé une tournée, on a consacré un déplacement dans les différentes régions pour examiner avec les représentants locaux la problématique et examiner la meilleure façon de développer les activités de changement climatique au niveau local. Alors, tout réside au niveau de l'élaboration des plans locaux. C'est là où nous estimons qu'il y a une nécessité d'améliorer la compétence de ces élus locaux. Ça ne veut pas dire qu'il n'y a rien, mais ça veut dire qu'il y a encore un gap et une marge importante à faire. Mais tout le travail doit être fait au niveau local, au niveau de la planification et de la renforcement de compétences des élus locaux.
Sidris, j'aimerais bien poser une question. Sidris, vous êtes un homme d'expérience. Est-ce qu'on doit mettre d'abord les fonds pour renforcer les compétences ou est-ce qu'on doit peut-être renforcer les compétences et peut-être s'il n'y a pas de fonds? Donc, comment on va gérer cette difficulté? Parce que normalement, au Kenya, ils ont mis de l'argent. Peut-être, lorsqu'on met de l'argent, automatiquement, les renforcements de compétences vont se faire automatiquement pour accéder. Sidris.
Bonjour, انت تكلمتي على كينيا. الماروك راه سي لا ميم شوز، غير هو لو ماروك راه باقيين شي شويه متعطلين. لحقاش لا كان في علمك في لو صالون ديال المكناس هذا العام الحكومه سينات واحد اون فانتين دو كونترا دو بروغرام بور هاد اللي ديستيني لهذوك الفلاحه الصغار. المشكل اللي كاين هو داك البطء اللي باش كنمشيو به. هذا هو هاد لي بروسيدير. مرة دابا راك هادوك لي فون راه كاين دابا واش ديال الشونجمون كليماتيك ديال الدوله ديال شي حاجه، كاينين دي فون ولكن كاين واحد البطء باش نمشيو. دابا ها هو من العام اللي فات درنا في ماي دوك لي كونترا بروغرام، حنا باقيين دابا كنديروا كيفاش غننزلوهم، كيفاش غنحطوهم، كيفاش غادي نوصلوا لهذاك الفلاح الصغير. راه باقي شويه البطء اللي هو اللي خاصنا دابا نخدموا فيه، واللي خاصكم تعاونونا فيه حتى نتوما.
Excusez-moi. En répondant à votre question, entre les renforcements des capacités et les fonds. À mon avis, c'est toujours, à mon avis personnel et mon expérience qui est vraiment très modeste, il faut les choses qui marchent en parallèle. C'est-à-dire toujours lorsque nous avons un fonds, toujours il y a une composante des renforcements des capacités qui marchent en parallèle, que ce soit des formations, accompagnement, tout ça, pour vraiment gagner le temps, parce qu'on peut faire des renforcements de capacités, on va attendre peut-être des années pour appliquer et les choses entre-temps changent. Donc voilà, à mon avis, les choses marchent en parallèle.
Et je pense qu'un des obstacles pour la finance de l'adaptation, ce sont les fonds. Et ce sont les renforcements de capacités aussi.
شكرا سي سعيد صباح الخير للجميع. Bon, pour la question ديال est-ce que c'est le renforcement des capacités ou bien c'est le financement, pour le Maroc, il faut savoir qu'il y a un comité de pilotage pour ça. C'est-à-dire un comité de pilotage qui a été اللي تعطاتو واحد 2.3 millions de dollars pour le renforcement des capacités. Parmi ces capacités, il y a la gouvernance, il y a la sensibilisation, l'accès à l'information, la mise en place de bases de financement durable et la réduction de la vulnérabilité des territoires. Le comité AIDA, en 2022, a 3 ans pour acquérir les objectifs.
Une petite clarification, merci Sibni Khlif, une petite clarification pour ce que Sibni Khlif vient de dire. Vous savez que le GESF, c'est-à-dire le Fonds vert climat, il alloue ce qu'on appelle readiness pour les pays et même pour les agences accréditées. Il peut, par exemple, dans le cadre de je suis un peu le processus, par exemple, le plan national d'adaptation. Pour que le Maroc puisse mettre en place un plan national d'adaptation, GCF donne à peu près 1 million de dollars pour accompagner le Maroc pour la mise en place de ce plan. Et aussi pour les indices du Maroc, il met un peu d'argent. Peut-être la question de madame, c'est ça. Parfois des fonds, on alloue une partie des fonds pour le renforcement de compétences, qu'on appelle readiness. Donc c'est ça peut-être, c'est Beni Khlif, il a dit. Malheureusement, ces readiness, nous comme société civile, on n'en bénéficie pas. C'est ça le problème. Heureusement, avec les amis de Germanwatch, vous avez suivi avec nous le projet de Germanwatch. Germanwatch, c'est une institution internationale qui a bénéficié de l'argent et qui nous a profité de cet argent, nous, PACJA et pas mal d'organisations au niveau Afrique.
Si Saïd. Alors, mobilisation des fonds et renforcement de capacité. Et moi, je me demande, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas une nécessité de renforcement de capacité pour la mobilisation des fonds? Voilà. Et puis, dans le cadre de l'MCD, on a déjà fait un travail exceptionnel parce qu'on a travaillé sur pour que les plans territoriaux prennent en considération les composantes climat et développement durable, s'aligner sur les objectifs, les ODD, etc. C'est un travail préparatif pour être qualifié dans ce sens. Merci.
Donc, on termine la restitution. Je passe la parole à Martha pour animer la deuxième partie.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope you all slept well. Good. Today is a monumental day because we are launching Keep the Promise campaign and the community of practice on adaptation for North Africa region. So I hope you are as excited as I am. I would want to now list the people who are going to join us in this session. We will have Charles, who is the head of programs and research at PACJA. We're going to have Steve from the East Africa Farmers Federation. And then lastly, but not least, of course, we'll have James, James from UNECA. So without further ado, I would like to invite Charles to the podium. Thank you, Charles.
GST schematic. GST schematic. GST schematic. You told me to mix Arabic and French, and I'm trying to do that. Adaramuna here. Very good. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, good morning once again. I hope you are energized enough for this yet interesting day. The whole of yesterday, we spent our time really looking at the climate finance flows in Africa, or lack of it, for that matter. And we listened to researchers, we listened to experts, in the field, and we were privileged really to hear really regarding contemporary situation regarding climate finance globally and how that impacts us, in Africa. So the work that was presented here by my sister Bekere is work that has been done for quite some time. It's actually research. A lot of references have been made to various, sources of data, and whatever we had really is what we can call really authentic information that is very, very useful in terms of supporting our advocacy. Because nowadays we talk about advocacy that is also evidence-based, so that whenever we lay our claims, like we are going to lay our claims through a statement that we have been able to generate from the conversations of yesterday, then that particular statement is informed by scientific data that we can actually, be able to make reference to. The information that was also presented by my colleague Abuya again, that is also research work that was really, really done, to really, interrogate the situation, the current, finance, arrangements and status across the globe, and how that affects Africa. Again, that is that we can be able to rely on. But you also heard from experts. Dr. Morobezi is really, really a seasoned, policy analyst, with UNECA. And listening to him as a policy maker, listening to him, as a policy advisor, really adds a lot of value, really, to the conversation we had, and therefore informing, our position, going forward. And of course, we heard from Peter Odengo, who is also a practitioner in the field. We had, from our colleagues, from FES yesterday, very interesting presentations here that were made, and with very interesting data coming up. I think it was a very, very, very rich conversation. But that may not make a lot of sense if we don't, use that information and put it to practice. Because at the end of the day, the question that is asked to all of us is, what is your contribution? What is your role, especially as non-state actors, in ensuring, therefore, that we still carry the mantle of climate finance advocacy, going forward? What is going to be our little contribution? I was privileged to work with a lady that is probably known to many of you, but who passed on about 11 years ago or so, and that was the late Professor Wangari Maathai. How many knew Professor Wangari Maathai, who was a Nobel laureate of 2004? She was the first woman in Africa, I think, to get an award, a Nobel laureate award. And she kept on saying, that it is the little things that citizens do, those little things, those little contributions that at the end of the day make a big difference. And she went on to give a story of the hummingbird. The hummingbird. She went on to say that one day, one time, and I'm now narrating the story in her version, there was fire, or fire erupted in a certain forest ecosystem. And you can imagine when fire, erupts in a forest ecosystem, of course, animals, trees, the vegetation, and all, biodiversity inside that forest is usually at risk. So therefore, when fire erupted, all the animals started running away from the forest, from the big animals like the elephants, from the small animals like the rabbits and hares. They all started running away. But there was this small band that we call the hummingbird. And this small band made its little efforts by going to the nearby river, and it would actually carry some little amount of water with its small beak. It would come and pour on the forest. Then it would go back to the same river, again, take some little bit of water from its small beak, come and put to the forest. And it looked and sounded ridiculous because it's a small bird. It can only carry a little amount of water, and therefore that could not make any difference in terms of bringing down the fire. And therefore, the big animals like the elephants, which had the capacity to carry a lot of water, wondered what is wrong with this bird. And they did question the bird. Those days animals were talking. Don't ask me when. So the animals asked this small bird, what the hell are you doing? You cannot stop this fire with the little water you're carrying in your very, very small beak. But the bird answered them and said, you people, or you animals, have the capacity to carry enough water to put out this fire. Instead, you're actually opting to run away. You're running away. But I'm doing the little thing I can be able to do. I'm doing and actually giving my little contribution. And the story continues. The animals were so challenged that everybody decided to go to the river, carry water, and they were able to put off, the fire in that forest, and they survived. Now, what is the moral of this story? We cannot sit behind our back and say, because we did not cause this particular fire, of course, climate change in this context, we are going to sit back and we wait for climate change to consume us. We must act. We must do something. We must give our little contribution in solving this particular problem. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, what we are going to do today is really a continuation of what we had yesterday. But now you're going to put it into practice. We are going really to see ourselves now within that context. We were talking about the global arrangement, the global situation, the global status on climate finance. But now we are cascading down to ourselves as non-state actors from Africa first and foremost, but number two, from the North African region, because we come from this region and therefore we must start home. In my language, we say charity begins at home. In that regard, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, today we'll be launching a very, very interesting initiative that we are calling Community of Practice on Adaptation, network, for the North Africa region. Sorry, we should have put this in French, but I know you'll be able to probably carry on your campaign, in French, in Arabic, so long as it's able to reach the people. Reason being, like we agreed yesterday, the adaptation need for the African continent or for Africa is really, really much higher than what we'd say is actually the mitigation needs. But we said yesterday that climate finance, the way it is at the moment, is skewed towards mitigation. And therefore, there's a huge adaptation gap for the continent, of Africa. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, as we go to COP28, that will be happening in Dubai later next month, we must start asking ourselves, what are some of the messages that we want to carry along? What kind of advocacy do we want to engage in to unlock adaptation finance for the benefit of the African people, for the benefit of communities at the front line of climate crisis? And therefore, that is the real reason as to why we are here to launch that initiative. Now, this initiative is going to touch on all the countries in the North African region. And therefore, we have Morocco. And Morocco, being the country where we are launching this, will therefore anchor that network. And therefore, the coordination of the network will be in Morocco. Why Morocco? One, I said it's because this is where we are launching it today. But again, I also want to mention that we have a project that is actually going to be presented by my colleague Eugene, who is joining us virtually. And that project is on supporting need-based, advocacy on adaptation. It is supported by the Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we're implementing it in more than 10 countries in Africa. Now, in North Africa, there are 2 countries that are beneficiaries of that initiative, and that is Morocco, but you also have Egypt. Those are the 2 countries that are beneficiaries of that particular program in terms of country-based initiatives, and we're going to be told more or be given more information around it. However, this initiative, it's a continent-wide initiative, and therefore, the community of practice initiative that we have will extend beyond the project countries. And therefore, this network is not only for the Moroccans and for the Egyptians. It brings along people from Tunisia, where my chair is seated. It's going to bring colleagues from Mauritania who are here together with us today. It's going to bring along our colleagues from Algeria. We have them represented here. It's going to bring along our colleagues from Libya, and which other Northern African country am I forgetting? Yeah? Egypt is here, yes. Okay. Now, Sudan, we decided to actually connect them with the Horn of Africa region. Yes? You are claiming them. If we claim them, we can still export them this side. But what we did, but I think that also makes sense. We can have them move this side, so that Southern Sudan is in the Northern Horn of Africa, and then Sudan can also connect to this end. So that's okay. I think that still makes sense. It's upon you. It's going to be your network. You can decide your catchment. Bottom line, what is important is to sit down and think about your region as members of North African, citizens of North African region. And what are your adaptation needs? What are your adaptation issues? What do you want to, push forward in terms of advocacy on adaptation? What do you want to see in your region? And how can we be able to join forces? So we'll be having 6 regional networks, and this is now the 3rd one that we're actually launching. We already launched the South African one. It's anchored in Malawi. We launched the Horn of Africa, which is actually anchored in Ethiopia. And now we are here launching, the North African region, which is going to be anchored here in Morocco. So that is just about a brief about why we are here. But to provide us with more details, we'll be hearing later substantive presentation from my colleague Eugene. He will do it in French, for the benefit of everyone, because really this is your initiative. And therefore, I don't have to start here and speak a lot of English. I want you to listen to it in French. It's actually translated in French, and we're going to hear about it. And thereafter, we'll also present terms of reference of this network. How then are we expecting this to run? I want to mention that this network does not in any way replace any other networks that are operating, from the region. It does not replace what Morocco and your initiatives. It doesn't, necessarily, take away, your mandate as an independent institution, or organization in your own respect. It is only a very, very loose network of like-minded organizations coming together, reasoning together. It's just a platform, really, to provide you with an opportunity to come together and reason together as members of this particular region. So therefore, without much ado, ladies and gentlemen, I want to take this opportunity to thank you and to welcome you really to this conversation. Thank you, Mother.
Thank you, Charles. So from Charles, we heard about advocacy being grounded on evidence. the importance of data and the importance of evidence. But then again, we need to be able to convert that into impact, into contribution, into influencing. There was also this anecdote that he told us about the little things we need to do, not to be discouraged, because at the end of the day, we need to know that we are aiming for a big change and change will come. So Charles also elaborated about keeping your promise, the network of community of practice on adaptation in North Africa, being grounded here and hosted by Morocco. Thank you, Charles, for that. I would like now to invite Norbert, actually. Steve is not here. Norbert, if you could come here.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, facilitator, for giving me this opportunity. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to extend our greetings from the East African Farmers Federation. They said that actually they are following what we are deliberating on, and they are proud to see the enthusiasm that is in this room. They have seen resourceful people. They have heard from research. They have heard from youth group. I'm sure probably we have also faith-based organization, some of our partners like UNECA, development initiatives, and the PACJA secretariat here. I think since PACJA is about justice, EFF, we are now in someone's region, and that is Munagri, which is the regional farmer organization in North Africa. And the CEO of that organization is here. If the facilitator allows, I would like to welcome for a piece of word from Madame Rich Fertit to greet you. And yeah, you can say something, because it will not be good under the PAFO network that I'm in your region, and then I take over everything, and why you honored with us. Okay, thank you. Yeah, welcome, Fertit.
C'est imprévu, mon ami. Hein? Okay. Alors, bonjour à toutes et à tous. Bon, je remercie l'EAFF, le réseau de l'Afrique de l'Est, vraiment pour cette invitation. C'est grâce à eux que je suis là aujourd'hui. Malheureusement, j'étais pas avec vous sur des autres événements ou bien des workshops. Donc, j'espère que ce n'est qu'un début. Donc, on va travailler par la suite et on peut faire beaucoup de choses. Bon, je parle sur l'agriculture, moi. Donc, on avait parlé avec Madame Bouraoui hier et on avait avec des autres délégués des conversations en bilatéral. Donc, c'est très intéressant. Merci à l'EFF pour cette opportunité. Et bon, j'espère qu'on aura peut-être vous nous supportez auprès des bailleurs de fonds pour bien renforcer l'agriculture en général. Voilà, merci à vous tous.
Merci beaucoup, madame. Yeah, for your information, EFF, UNAGRI, and 3 other regional farmer organizations from Southern Africa, Central Africa, and West Africa will represent beyond 80 million smallholder farmers. So when we join the PACJA network, we join knowing that we are a big constituency, and our main sector is agriculture. As we are aware, we don't want So when we joined the PACTA network, ours was to lead on the agricultural sector. And for your information, since we started this partnership with PACTA late last year, there is a lot of we have been able to do and a lot we have been able to achieve. As he mentioned, we've already launched 2 communities of practices in Southern Africa, in the Horn of Africa. And today we are glad that we are launching the 3rd one in the North Africa region. So what is important for us is that we said as a farming community, we need to join with faith-based organization, the youth group, the media, the researchers. Yeah, let's say all the non-state actors for matter to deal with climate change. First of all, we felt that farm organizations, we are not involved in climate change negotiations. So we don't know what is happening. So even when we are invited to go, let's say last year, people, they went to Egypt, we don't even know what to discuss, who to meet. So number 2, there are issues of capacity. So when it comes to issue of capacity, we found ourselves that we don't know even what we need to ask. Yeah, I like the lady from Mauritania yesterday said one of the challenge is that we don't know even how to frame our needs or even be able to quantify to know to what extent that we need the support. Number 3, we are talking about finance and especially for adaptation. Because we said for Africa is that, yeah, people, they talk of mitigation, but as we selected adaptation. So then when we talk to finance, so if you are not involved in those processes, how are we going to access the financing? So it was important for us to join hands with PACTA, and as we say in French, the New Fair Force. So EFF is very glad to be here as you launch the North Africa communities of practices, and we want to see that it will allow you to learn from one another. Like here, I mean across countries, and especially we are looking ways that you'll be able to profile key actors. Those, I remember the main presentation we had yesterday from Peter, the practitioner from the Treasury of in Kenya, in the Kenyan government. They mentioned a lot of opportunities, but for us to be able to tap into those resources, we need to know where to look. So this one are communities of practices where we get together, we are able to share the information, we exchange contacts, we map our key stakeholders, then we strategize on an advocacy campaign. Then when they listen to our message, they can incorporate us into their initiatives, especially for the project, so that we can be able to get the resources that you need to be able to change the things on the ground. Especially now we are talking that the focus is on women and youth. So those are resources that are available for women and youth for agriculture, for climate. So you need to be on top of things. So for you to be able to go there, if you go as an individual or as one organization, you not have any strength. So to get the bargaining power, so we need to join hand collectively. We move as one family. So that is the key message from our side with regards to these communities of practice. So for our own experience, like when we join this collaboration with PACTA, I can tell you for our side, there is a lot we have achieved. Like we worked hand in hand with PACTA in the preparation of Africa Climate Summit 2023. You've heard yesterday that it concluded recently in Nairobi. We were able to host a side event. I'm telling you as EFF, where we talked to the ministers and the president from different constituents around or countries around Africa, and we're able to tell them the message we want. I can tell you there are some bigger organizations which will not been able to host such kind of side event. I'm sure also PACJA was able to have some parallel session. So this basically means that people are out there, they actually want also to hear from us. So it is us, how we strategize, how we put forward our agenda so that we are able to say, okay, we want to be part and parcel of everything, but also we want to demonstrate that we are capable to bring to the table our own contribution. That's what I think Charles Dash mentioned. Yeah, we don't have to think like we are not powerful, that they are financial, they are the government. Yeah, we are the people. We are the people. Like for us, you know, like my bosses are readers. So readers are politicians. So when they go to put across the message, they say, okay, I'm bringing 5 million. Those are voters. So if you don't listen to me, probably the next election cycle, you might find yourself out of the office. So it's not a matter of intimidating, but also for us to be able to demonstrate that whatever you are doing, it affects us. So whatever money you have, it is for us, because even we are the main taxpayers. So we really need to sit on the same table. We strategize together, because climate change, when it comes, the effects will not say that you are here or you are this. So it will affect all of us equally, and it will affect all of us in a negative way. Yeah, the other things we're able to achieve right now, everybody is talking about the Dubai, which is coming, which is starting later next year. So EFF has been invited to the organizing committee. So we sit there. So actually now we are glad of that, so that we are able to table our position, especially for coming from the farming community. But also we are glad, since we are a part of PACJA network, we will be able to correct also your views, so that we can go and put across whichever the message as the whole network will be able to agree on. So I'm talking about that. Yeah, to tell you that when you join hands with people who have same interests, we'll be able to align your strategies, we'll be able to align your advocacy messages. Then I'm sure that in a short time, you can be able to see that there is an impact, and you are winning recognition, then you can move forward. So Charles talked about the project we are jointly implementing, and actually we are glad that there are people on the ground here. We want to hear what also you are doing, but mainly as is need-based advocacy for adaptation, and also because farming communities were coming a bit late, we also started from the point that we wanted to build the capacities of our farm organization, so that they are able to understand, first of all, climate change, adaptation is what versus mitigation. Why is it mitigation preferred than adaptation? Yeah, where do you get the finance? Yeah, all that, so that we bring them to speed, so that when we come like here, we can be able to have a discussion with you. So there is a lot we gain. As I mentioned, there are several examples I can give. So these are actually to tell farm organization in North Africa to feel free to join other groups here in these communities of practice. So we expect that you be proactive. EFF is there to help whenever you call upon us. And also I believe that there will be some feedback we can get from the exchange you'll be having, that can feed into the discussion we have at PACJA continental level, and we can be able to have solid declaration or statements whenever we have the chance to participate, where we represent our different constituents. So with those many remarks, I want to thank again PACCHA for inviting us for this important process. We want to thank our hosts here in Morocco for good hospitality and the people, especially the people of Morocco. And I'm looking forward for this launch of these communities of practice on adaptation in North Africa, being a vibrant, dynamic, and successful network for all of us to exchange. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Norbert, and thank you also, Madam, from East Africa Farmers Federation. I will just quickly summarize what you said, Norbert. You reminded us of the 80 million African farmers, small-scale farmers that you are representing. That is a huge constituency. And also joining hands with PACCHA to better understand and articulate our needs and understand climate finance at global and subnational level, but more importantly, the solidarity of Africans on climate action and what needs to be done. You've also reminded us of hosting events and speaking to powerful policymakers and the role that you are going to play in the organizing committee for COP28 that will be in Dubai. But most importantly, carrying and being the voice of African farmers at COP. And we've also heard, and we hope that our North Africa colleagues have heard, that you are encouraging farmers to come together, have a network, but most importantly, synergize with other networks as well and the Federation. So I know I have not done justice to your points and Madam's points, but those were some of the things that stood out. We now would like to invite James, please, from the UNECA. When Charles said earlier, you have a wealth of experience, and this is an opportunity for you to share with us your wisdom.
Martha. Good morning again, distinguished colleagues. Good morning. Salam alaikum. Yes. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the statements made by Charles and Robert, and the emphasis that they have put on the importance, the significance of adaptation in Africa. In fact, the simplest way to understand why and how adaptation is reflected as a priority action for Africa is to look at the nationally determined contributions of African countries, the NDCs. Every analysis of those NDCs shows that up to 80% of the climate actions that countries have identified for themselves in the NDCs, in fact, focus on adaptation. The reason for that is very straightforward. Like Robert says, we don't have much to mitigate. We have a lot to adapt to. We are the victims of climate change. We don't contribute that much to global warming. So yes, adaptation is a priority. But also, if you look further in our NDCs on this continent, the implementation of almost again 80% of the climate actions is dependent on conditional financing. That is, African countries recognize that although we have to adapt to climate change, we cannot in fact invest in adaptation if we don't have financing from other sources, conditional sources, not from our own budgets. And this is the challenge that we've been discussing since yesterday. That financing simply is not available. When it is available, it is not sufficiently available, or it is not available at the time that we want it. However, the impacts of climate change are still continuing, whether we have finance or we don't have finance. climate is impacting on us. This means that adaptation is also happening with or without finance. And work that we have carried out at the UN Economic Commission for Africa demonstrates that on average, African governments are spending between 3 and 5% of their own gross domestic product on adapting to climate finance. So we have governments diverting funds away from other priorities to invest, for instance, in securing sustainable urban water supply, to invest in securing energy for industry, for households and so on, to invest in supporting farmers to identify drought resilient seeds, a lot of adaptation actions. These are actions that are not budgeted for, but they are forced on our governments. And our data also suggests that these costs of adaptation are likely to increase to upwards of 15% of GDP by 2030. And most of that increase is in fact going to happen in North Africa and the Sahel. So adaptation is a very key priority and an urgent priority, but also a very costly priority. And we do need to invest in ensuring that we can in fact continue to adapt in a way. But when adaptation is not available, is not possible, for whatever reason, whether it's finance, whether it's capacity, we've had the discussion about capacity building this morning, whether it's technology, if we cannot adapt, then we are entering the territory of loss and damage. Because if we cannot adapt, we lose whatever it is that we cannot adapt to climate change. We lose it. And now we also understand that loss and damage is still something that is not yet fully defined in the UNFCCC framework. And therefore, we really need to ensure that we support adaptation actions. We look for all of the resources that are necessary to support those adaptation actions. And if they don't happen, then we lose what it is. Adaptation is also challenging in the sense that if it is not done properly, it can also lock us into actions, programs, decisions that become very costly in future. This is what is defined as maladaptation. I think we all understand how and under what conditions maladaptation occurs. So this means that it is not enough to identify adaptation as a priority, and it is not enough to seek finance for adaptation. It is very equally important for us to ensure that we understand the conditions in which we are operating in, and we ensure that the adaptation actions that we propose will not lock us into maladaptation. This is very important. And I think for me, when I look at the launch of the community of practice, this is one of the major benefits that we can have of developing, creating a network, because you are going to have people with different expertise, people with different experiences, people with different information and different capacities as part of the network. And they will assist us to understand what adaptation actions are viable, what adaptations actions we cannot engage in, and what adaptation actions are potentially dangerous, can potentially lead us into maladaptation. So this is what makes a community of practice very significant and a very worthwhile development. And here I would really like to congratulate yourselves, the North African communities, but also PACJA for facilitating the creation of this community of practice, and also to wish you all of the success. And also to state that the ECA is going to be available to support the network. Now, Charles started his presentation with an anecdote about the fact that whatever little it is that we can contribute, it is important. We should contribute. Allow me to end my presentation also with another anecdote. So, in Africa, once upon a time, very long ago, there was an old woman, a grandmother, a very wise old woman. She was wise because she knew a lot of things. She was wise because she had experienced, she had observed, and she had spent all her life providing advice to other people. But in her village, there were also these two young girls who decided that they wanted to test the wisdom of the grandmother. The girls decided that it was not possible that the grandmother could know everything and could be in a position to advise everyone. So they designed a test. They captured a bird, not a hummingbird, but a bird. And they walked up to the grandmother and says, grandmother, we have something in our hand. Can you tell us what it is? The grandmother says, it's a bird, my daughter, you have a bird. And the girl said, in which hand is this bird? Is it in my left hand or my right hand? The grandmother said, it is in your left hand, my daughter. And the girl said, is the bird alive or is it dead? The intention was, if the grandmother said the bird is alive, she would squeeze it and kill it in her hand. And if the grandmother said the bird is dead, she would open her hand and let the bird fly away. So the grandmother said, that, my daughter, is in your hands. It is all in your hands. And this is exactly what is happening with adaptation. While we need to do the little that we can do, whatever we do is also all in our hands. Let us believe that. Thank you very much.
Yes, amazing. Charles, you were not wrong when you said that James is full of wisdom, and that we've seen, and with that beautiful anecdote. Yes, exactly. A walking encyclopedia. James, thank you so much for reminding us that adaptation is a priority to us, because we have a lot to adapt, but not a lot to mitigate. You emphasized on the conditional financing, because right now what we have is, it is not available. When it's available, it's not sufficient. It's not sufficient. It's not predictable. It's not easily accessible. That is the financing landscape that we are operating. You also emphasized about the narrow policy and budget space that our governments are operating, where they are spending 3 to 5% of their GDP. Their economy is spending on climate action, which is a costly exercise. If we are not able to adapt, then the next course of action would be to go into loss and damage discussion. But that is, you reminded us, a long journey. It's a struggle that we may not even be able to win because of the political dynamics, the political economy dynamics, and the global architecture, which is rigged against us, which is not in favor. When we are saying adaptation, in emphasizing the community of practice on an adaptation network, you cautioned us about maladaptation, and we need to be careful. That's why it is important for us to have this network, which will pull different expertise and also constituencies like the farmers. What are the skills and expertise that we are going to get? What are African climate scientists telling us who are also going to contribute to this network? We are grateful, sir, that you affirmed the support from the UNECA in this effort. So now, before moving to Eugene, I would just like to get a couple of reflections. I know, Shakri, you have one. So I will give the floor to Shakri, and if you have any reflection that you want to make, please let me know. Yes, Shakri.
Non, c'est tout simplement une question pour Charles et James, parce que la notion de cette communauté de pratique, il est intéressant de la comprendre au départ. C'est un concept très important. On aimerait bien avoir des clarifications sur comment se construit ce concept, cette communauté de pratiques. Y a-t-il d'expériences, par exemple, en Afrique ou ailleurs, pour qu'on puisse s'inspirer sur le mode de fonctionnement, parce que c'est très important. Voilà, si Charles et n'importe quelle personne, je pense c'est aussi, si vous avez une réponse là-dessus, on aimerait bien avoir quelques éléments. Pour bien initier ce concept au Nord-Afrique.
Shakri, is your question about the conceptualization of the network, or
if you have any example
of what?
with the
Community of practice. Okay. So if I get you correctly, you're asking, there are community of practices out there who have been successful. So what is the best practice out there? Do we know the challenges that they face? And how did they overcome those challenges? And how did they become the best in that area? Have we done that mapping?
Thank you so much, Shakri. I think I want to defer that question until we present the project and we also present the terms of reference for that community of practice. Then you're going to probably get to see what is expected of you and probably guidance in terms of how then you can be able to establish your network and move.
Thank you, Shakri. It's like you want us to start from a solid foundation of understanding what is expected. Yes, okay. Yes, please.
Si vous permettez, je voudrais parler en français, donc les non francophones qui veulent mettre la... Voilà, je suis un ingénieur agronome et j'ai passé 3 décennies au ministère de l'Agriculture et dans les mécanismes de décision des politiques agricoles au Maroc. Je voudrais partager avec vous, très peu, en quelques mots, les enseignements qu'on peut tirer de cette expérience. La première des choses, et qui me semble assez importante à souligner, qu'il y a 2 approches pour l'adaptation dans le domaine agricole. Il y a l'approche qui est basée sur les grandes exploitations capitalistiques, etc., qui sont capables d'investir et de rentabiliser l'agriculture. Et il y a l'approche qui est basée sur les petites exploitations, disons, à caractère social. Alors, au Maroc, nous marchons sur ces 2 pieds. Et c'est assez intéressant. Mais ce qu'il faut souligner aussi, c'est que le Maroc a un potentiel agricole assez important à mobiliser. Et nous n'arrivons pas à mobiliser tout ce potentiel pour différentes contraintes. Je voudrais mettre l'accent essentiellement sur les petites exploitations. On a fait une expérience qui consiste à soutenir les petites exploitations pour protéger ce que nous appelons les produits de terroir, c'est-à-dire les espèces, les variétés, etc., qui sont adaptées au terroir. Et dans ces espèces, il y a les plantes aromatiques et médicinales. On a fait un progrès énorme en termes de production. Malheureusement, ce qui nous manque, c'est le marketing. C'est le marketing parce que ces coopératives n'arrivent pas à commercialiser leurs produits. Alors donc, troisième expérience qu'il faut tirer, c'est qu'il y a, sur le plan technologique, nécessité de développer l'agroécologie. Et ça, c'est une niche qui est assez importante, qui peut rapporter beaucoup pour les petits agriculteurs. Alors, la recommandation que je voudrais faire, c'est de tirer les enseignements de tout ça pour essayer d'accompagner, d'inciter les pouvoirs publics à accompagner ces deux catégories d'exploitation et surtout les petites exploitations, les accompagner sur le terrain pour les soutenir et pour résoudre leurs problèmes, essentiellement les problèmes techniques d'agroécologie, agroforesterie, etc., mais surtout l'aspect de commercialisation, parce que même les petits, quand ils arrivent à produire, il y a des intermédiaires avec la consommation et les intermédiaires prennent beaucoup plus d'argent que ce que... Donc, il y a un plaidoyer à faire en termes d'adaptation dans le domaine agricole pour soutenir les petites exploitations, pour surmonter leurs difficultés de marketing et de commercialisation de leur production. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. I would like stress on some points. First of all, maybe it's very important to have this new network at the scale of our region, North Africa. And I would like to congratulate all persons, all personality who has behind this initiative. We are as family of INCD, are work closely in order to ensure the success of this network. I would like also stress on a second point that agriculture, adaptation, rural area is very important for the climate action, but also to do sustainable development, especially at the local scale. I have one question which goes in the same sense of my colleague Saeed. Is there some experience on action plan, some action regarding to building capacity and to give more visibility to this experience and initiative? Thank you again, and we are very happy to have this new network. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Everyone, is asking me to speak in French. Unfortunately, I'm very poor in French, so you excuse me for that. I think I really like the presentation, and what is most important is to remember that what James said about the failure to adapt, which leads to loss and damage. In the sense that when you look at loss and damage, there are two kind of broad categories of loss and damage: avoidable and unavoidable. So in this case, we should not forget the fact that there is loss and damage which is avoidable. For example, if finance is available to us, or technology is available to us, or capacity is built, yeah, then we can respond effectively to avoid it. But for sure, we are in the regime or time of loss and damage, and therefore there is already unavoidable loss and damage that will inevitably happen and affect our farmers. So when you are going to talk about adaptation as a community of practice in North Africa, it is important to bear in mind that we are going to confront those two aspects of loss and damage. Yeah, we should not forget the fact that from yesterday's conversation, we still have a very huge gap when it comes to addressing the adaptation needs in terms of financing, and therefore that avoidable loss and damage is also going to be inevitable anyway if there is no finance, after all, as a means of implementation. Then the other thing I really wanted to point out in this conversation is that we should always bear in mind that right now we are calling for locally led adaptation actions. That's very important. So in your community of practice, we don't want a situation where we continue talking about adaptation at higher level, macro level, like at the national level or at the regional level alone. We want to see adaptation that is truly locally led, aligned to the locally led adaptation principle. I think that is something which is very critical that we should bear in mind. And then lastly, is the aspect of understanding the vulnerability and the capacities of farmers when it comes to the challenges they face from climate change. And therefore, as a community of practice, really should be pushing for participatory climate risk assessment, particularly at the local level, because adaptation is quite context specific, so that people can identify their vulnerabilities and adaptation priorities. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicolas.
Merci beaucoup. J'ai une question, des petites recommandations. La première question, c'est peut-être Shakil l'a évoqué, il faut que beaucoup plus clarifier le concept communauté de pratique. De quelle pratique s'agit-il et dans quel domaine? Si j'ai bien compris, on parle d'une expérience qui parle de communauté de pratique dans le domaine de l'agriculture. Est-ce qu'on ne peut pas la transmettre à d'autres domaines et bien sûr, et la généraliser, ça pourrait être très fructueux. En ce qui concerne les recommandations, en termes d'agriculture, si on parle en termes d'agriculture et en termes d'adaptation, notre continent africain, bon, il est très riche avec un savoir traditionnel en domaine d'adaptation. Et ce savoir traditionnel doit être identifié, restitué et capitalisé. Et je pense que notre réseau PACJA peut faire la chose, c'est-à-dire identifier ce savoir. Il est vraiment énorme, il est très diversifié, sachant que rien que dans notre pays Maroc, il y a pas mal de choses dans le domaine d'adaptation au niveau agriculture. Il faut identifier ce savoir traditionnel, le capitaliser bien sûr, et le médiatiser, le valoriser, pourquoi pas. Bien sûr, ça serait une plateforme de plaidoyer extraordinaire pour mobiliser et bien sûr fédérer beaucoup de fonds. Ça, c'est très important. Deuxième chose qui est très important, il faut s'investir sur les nouvelles générations. Parce que dans le domaine d'agriculture, on trouve peu de générations qui s'investissent dans le domaine d'agriculture. Et c'est pour cela, côté éducation et côté investissement dans les nouvelles générations, c'est très important. Il faut réfléchir, il faut monter quelque chose là-dessus. Je vous remercie.
Good morning, everyone. First, I want to say congratulations to our brothers in North Africa, because we're going to launch the community of practice on adaptation network in North African region. My question is, what are the main steps to implement that approach practice on the ground of North Africa? In other way, when we're going to pass from decisions, strategies to actions as far as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else? Yes. Okay. So if you could just introduce yourself, your name.
Thank you. I'm a junior doctor from Tunisia and a negotiator with the Tunisian party. I'd like to start by congratulating PACJA for the new initiative that is really needed with the current status quo. I wanted to follow up with a question for the Mr. who talked about loss and damage, because there seems not to be consensus if loss and damage would be part of adaptation or not. So how would this initiative consider loss and damage? Would it be something we would be working on when we work on adaptation, or would it be something else? I'm talking about this in the context of the global stocktake, that in this the latest report that was out 1 month ago, it says adaptation including loss and damage. So this is something important that we need to consider, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. So Nicholas, I'll come to you later.
Yes, right. Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. I have just a very open question for everyone. So first of all, I'm Hamza Haki Al-Kharoubi. I'm a researcher in the UR team of the UNESCO, doing my research on climate adaptation and the role of CSOs in the Arab world. And one of the main challenges that we came across through our research is that there is no data. So everyone is speaking about climate change, but the data is really we always find shortage in data. And when we speak and we try to solve this question, we always need a lot of resources to make a proper research. Now, I can see that we are facing the very same problem on a continental level in Africa. This is a very open question for everyone. What should we do to actually know how deep is the damage caused to our dear continent, caused by the climate change? And second of all, how are our communities actually adapting? What are the success stories and how can we find them? Other than just hearing about them in such meetings, great meetings, in other workshops dealing with CSOs, hearing success stories from enterprises all across the continent. This is informal way to find, to actually track how is climate adaptation happening in the continents. The question is, how can we formalize this way to actually look for data? What is the proper way to find to actually describe climate adaptation in the continent nowadays? Because we can't enhance something that we don't know everything about. We can't solve a problem that we don't know about. We only hear about. So my question again is, should we or should we not actually do a proper research about climate adaptation and how communities are actually adapting in the continent? Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. So what I'll do is there are certain questions that are asked. Okay, so I'll give the floor for response, and then maybe as people are responding from this side, if we have Ahmed from Egypt online, from the PACJA, the coordinator of PACJA Egypt, then I will also would like to solicit a reflection. Yeah, so we had a discussion from Professor on the role of the middleman and linking it to market, and that is an open discussion. I don't think it is targeted to anyone, but to also remember that even in the World Trade Order, that things are not in our favor, because when you are exporting raw materials, it is usually duty-free, quota-free, tariff-free. But the more you add value and take it to the world market, then tariff escalates. So that is keeping you down, to just export unprocessed goods. Yes, exactly. The power imbalance and how do we negotiate? And maybe how do we also take advantage of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the AFCFTA, and the opportunity that it is going to give to our small-scale farmers. And of course, we are also heartened and encouraged by your colleague who is not in the room now, but the intellectually driving the network and intellectually supporting the network and the conceptualization and the support from academia is invaluable. Nicholas, I'll come back to you, but you emphasized on the difference between avoidable and unavoidable loss and damage, and adaptation being locally laid. We have so the last speaker talked about data and the need for data. This is a problem not just in climate change, but in almost all areas in Africa, because my organization is about data actually. So it is one thing to say we don't have data, especially qualitative data. We may not have. You talked about best practices. That is one. The other issue we have on data is data is collected by everyone for programmatic design, programmatic intervention, but data is everywhere. So how do you bring it to a centralized place so that it is accessible, it is interoperable, and it is harmonized? So those are the issues that were discussed, but we have a question on community of practice and in which domain, and is it adaptation agriculture? That is something we are going to get from Eugene, because Eugene is going to present to us what kind of community practice are we talking about, in which domain is it, and that is going to be presented in the next session. There is no problem. So now I want to give you the floor, Nicolas, and there is a question from the young man. He's talking about there is no definition yet on loss and damage, and it's not part of adaptation. So if you could respond to that.
Okay, thank you very much. I think loss and damage is a subject which has been there since the UNFCCC was established. If you read the history of the UNFCCC from 1992, loss and damage has been a central subject. Okay, having said that, but formally, loss and damage is reflected in the Paris Agreement. If you read Article 8, yeah? So to that extent, and right now we are moving on, and it has been agreed that we have a loss and damage finance facility established at COP28 that will be happening in Dubai later this year. This is what I really want to address when it comes to avoidable and unavoidable loss and damage. When we talk about unavoidable loss and damage, it refers to the loss and damage that is inevitable regardless of the technology in place, the capacity in place, or even the level of finance that we may be having at this point in time. We cannot just avoid it. It is inevitable. Like, people say that death is inevitable, that eventually you will die. I think even Islam teaches the same, that there is no soul that will not taste death. So that is inevitable. Like the sea level rise. So due to the prevailing warming, certain parts like islands are experiencing sea level rise. What can you do about it? It is inevitable that now certain aspects have to happen anyway. We have lost some biodiversity due to climate change. We will never restore them. They are gone. That's serious. That's now unavoidable because of the global warming. But certain aspects can be avoided. Yeah. For example, if people can be supported to maybe procure drought-tolerant crop seeds or varieties, yeah, when you're talking about farmers, because of maybe reduced rainfall due to climate change, then they can be able to cope. That's avoidable. But if they don't have the means to get that, then it means that they will actually suffer the loss and damage. So those broad categories are very important: avoidable and unavoidable. Unavoidable is inevitable. It is here with us. There is very little we can do with existing science, technology, or capacity, and even finance. So that is with us. Then lastly, loss and damage. I want to call loss and damage, I want to see it as a continuum. You get it? So actually loss and damage is a big subject which contains mitigation in it. It contains adaptation in it. It contains even risk management in it. That's why you had the conversation about humanitarian response, and I think you're doing something about it. Yeah. So we can actually address loss and damage through adaptation. In that way, particularly where it is avoidable, we adapt to avoid it. We can also address loss and damage through mitigation. If we agree to enhance our emission reduction substantially, then we can avoid some loss and damage in future by stabilizing the global warming. So loss and damage actually is a very broad subject which encompasses all forms of actions. Yeah, but it's something that we can discuss even for the entire day. I think Dr. James here knows that.
You want to say something?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you, Nicholas. Indeed, this is a very important question, and I think you are absolutely correct to say that in the context of the global stock take, I was a little bit part of the consultations, the technical consultations, but was not involved in the writing of the actual report. But the context in which loss and damage is linked to adaptation in the GST is actually along the same continuum that Nicholas talks about. So the GST recognizes that in fact there are hard limits to adaptation. There are certain things that you can adapt to and certain things that you can never adapt to. It is constructed in the Paris Agreement is beyond 1.5 degrees. Adaptation in many instances becomes increasingly difficult. And so it is not actually that loss and damage is part of adaptation, but rather that loss and damage is part of that continuum. If you cannot adapt, then you have to consider L and D. This is also linked to the data question that the gentleman here is asking, because the other challenge of the Paris Agreement is that we talk about 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees warming. These are global averages. These are not specific to contexts. So most of the global averages are actually based on observations that are undertaken outside of Africa. I think if you exclude North Africa and South Africa, the rest of Africa has got fewer weather and climate observation facilities, sessions than the city of London, the continent. But Africa has got the largest land mass between the tropics, which means in fact what happens to the global climate system is actually driven by the geographic and atmospheric conditions between the tropics in Africa, but we know very little about it. So the data question is really very critical. How do we even in our local context understand what climate impacts are likely to be and so on? So here, let me point you to the African Climate Policy Center, sometime back in 2013, actually produced the only model-based projection of likely impacts of climate change at the different projected of the IPCC projections. And this projection that we did at ACPC, in fact, actually became the basis of the Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage, because it is model-based. But I mean, a model is a model. It's as good as the assumptions that inform that model. However, if you're interested, we can give you access to that information. And it's still very important to link that to how we can then understand the linkages between loss and damage and adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas and James, for your responses. I just wanted, before closing the session, I just wanted to emphasize what my young sister said here. We know there are practices down there. There are approaches. Let's understand about decisions and also move to action. So with those remarks, I want to close the session, but Shakri, you have logistical announcements. Okay.
Si, merci, on applaudit Martin. Alors, il y a certains points de logistique. Alors, je parle de deux groupes. Groupes qui sont invités avec Friedrich Ebert. Normalement, ils doivent faire check-out maintenant. Ceux qui sont avec PACJA, bien sûr, ils ont le droit jusqu'à demain. Donc, c'est clair. Donc, je parle avec les amis qui sont venus au nom de Friedrich Ebert. Ils doivent quitter tout de suite et font check-out. Premier point. Deuxième point. On va avoir un break juste après, c'est-à-dire en principe à 11 heures. Et le déjeuner à 1h30. Pourquoi? Parce que à 2h30, on va partir pour aller vers le forum des jeunes. Il y a un minibus qui va s'arrêter juste devant l'hôtel. On aimerait bien savoir quelles sont les personnes qui partent de l'hôtel vers le forum des jeunes. Comme ça, pour connaître le nombre. C'est Ayoub. Alors, s'il vous plaît, combien de personnes? 1, 2, Nicolas, tu vas vers... You understand or you don't understand? You go without? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 23, 24, 25. Non, pourquoi? Pour organiser un peu le moyen de transport. Donc, il y aura 2 minibus. Alors, est-ce qu'il y a certains qui préfèrent aller par voiture, qu'ils ont leur propre voiture? Je ne pense pas. Mais on est 25. C'est ça, 2 minibus. On peut aller à l'aise. Donc, 2 minibus. S'il vous plaît, gardez ça en tête. Donc, on va aller faire le break et en même temps, il faut faire le check-out. On n'a pas beaucoup de temps. Aussi, pensez à 2h30 pour le bus. Alors, je vous donne un temps très... Dans une école d'Amarjan. Donc, c'est بالهند خرج هو قلنا واش بعيد هنا ولا قريب لان قال لك الاخوان واش à quelle heure on va finir le forum وفاء شوف وفاء ايوب شوف لي وفاء لان هما اللي عندهم à quelle heure Silk City وفاء tu as le programme du forum. En principe, à quelle heure vous avez prévu de s'arrêter le forum? Le forum des jeunes, à quelle heure? Parce qu'il y a certains qui vont aller avec nous. Hein? Donc 2 heures, c'est bon. Donc il faut compter 18 heures, maximum 19 heures ici. Maximum, c'est-à-dire il faut prévoir le billet à 19 heures, à mon avis. Moïm, c'est bon, les choses sont claires. C'est bon. Mais il ne faut pas oublier qu'on va recommencer ici à 11h30. C'est-à-dire, vous avez un petit temps pour faire tous ces exercices. Check-out, break et revenir ici parce qu'on doit terminer à 1h30. Is okay?
It's good. Yeah, good. No. Yeah.
One person correct, I am very one person writes, I am very at the airport. Yes. Yeah. Yes. No, yeah, you know, it's like last year when we had yes, you see people come from marriage, yes. I wanted to send it. No, my name and everything. I really want, once I know everything with that, yeah, that, I do my other thing, knowing that, right, trouble. Because otherwise, I don't even be able to do my thing. They are not sure that I will work. The other thing will be, you know, the getting here. I'm sure they have. One of those ones. Yes.